6 cars before split. All people really enjoyed it.
The transition from, the drivers we're talking about, they had to adjust to. It's not like they'd never dealt with, bumpy courses before. It's something that comes with road racing, but it was interesting to see how they navigated that. That's got to be tough on the body as well.
Well, they're all
doing that.
They're all icing down.
I'm sure they are.
Yeah, they are. The hands especially, and I know some of the drivers were already dealing after practice.
Yeah.
Had blisters on their hands just from the wheel moving around. Because I can tell you that I'm obviously never driven an Indy car, but those cars are so sensitive, and Joseph Newgarden's told me this, that the wheel it just bounces around. That's just what it does. And you can hold it as tight as you want. It's still going to bounce around on you just because they're so sensitive to any type of contact. And that was going to be the biggest thing outside of the tight turns and not being on the course, that they knew it was going to be bumpy. It's city streets, so they're not smoothed out and manicured like a normal racetrack would be. They fixed some areas. That was one thing that Chris Parker, the president of the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix, said before, that there were some trouble spots, that uneven surfaces that they had to smooth out and redo. But overall, I mean, those are the same streets that people were driving on, late last week. So that they just had to deal with that. But I think overall, that's where from everybody else. So you saw it yesterday how that played out.
Let's go to our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Tim texting in from Lewisburg. I was live there and was sitting in the stands where the first wreck was. I had trees in my view of the Jumbotron, so I only saw the cars when they came past us. The rest of the track was a mystery. After saying all that, this was still one of the coolest events that I've ever been to. So, Tim, having some fun yesterday at the track.
Yeah, and I know some people – listen – it's a street course. So
you're not going to be able to see the whole thing.
Right. It's spread out. It's not like going to the Nashville Super Speedway and you can see the whole track. And so full disclosure, as big of a race fan as I've never been to a road course. That was the first time that I had ever been to any type of road course or street course. And it is certainly a different view. And even for like us in the media, we didn't have like an overhead view that you could really get a good glimpse of the track. But they were using the club level at Nissan Stadium for, like the press box, so to speak, for those calling the race. But, I mean, so I think it's not going to be the perfect view of everything, but I think that was kind of the general consensus that I got from people. I did want to play a clip, if we can. Scott Dixon, who finished second, and here's a fun fact about Scott Dixon. He actually won the last 3 races at the Nashville Super Speedway in IndyCar, which they left there in 2008. But he was asked in post-race availability, people complaining on Twitter, too many cautions, what do they need to do to the track? And this was his answer.
I don't know. Everybody else seemed pretty pumped, man. I don't know if they're just drunk, but they're pretty excited. Yeah, it was a crazy race. Maybe driver etiquette needs to be kicked up a bit. I think, there was definitely some regulars that were making the same mistakes and hitting people. So, maybe that needs to be looked at. Or the penalties need to be stronger for when you cause accidents like that. So, I don't know. It's a tricky track. It's really difficult, and especially on restarts with trying to get temperature in the tires and knowing that it was going to be somewhat hard to pass. There was a lot of people trying to make it happen on restarts, and I totally get that. So I don't know. It's a balance, right? That you got to try and work out, and maybe next year will be different. I think there's maybe some areas of the track that could change a little bit next year that would create some passing zones and maybe make the racing a little bit better, so there isn't so much emphasis. But you look at guys like Herder, man. He made the passes happen. So it can be done cleanly like he did.
That was Scott Dixon yesterday after the race talking about, some of it's on the drivers, maybe driver etiquette, and that was a pretty strong comment he leveled there. But, to his point, this is the first year of the race.
Right.
And you can make some adjustments as you continue to move forward with this thing.
Yeah, and the hope is that this is the first of many.
Right.
The initial contract is 3 years, so they're guaranteed 2 more. My guess is it's going to go beyond that because they're going to take what they did over the course of this weekend, and they're going to build on that.
Yep.
I can 100% I will guarantee it that track next year is going to look a little different.
Yep.
That's just what you expect. It's a road course. You have that ability. It's not like a permanent course where you can't just change it at the drop of a hat. So they can modify some things. Turn 9 was the trouble corner yesterday. Very, very tight corners. But at the same time, you're going to hear, and of course, the drivers that finish up front, they're going to say this, but they like the challenge of it, that it was a very challenging course. But you also have to, I'm learning in IndyCar there's a lot more gentleman's agreement that, there's some turns that you need to back off a little bit and not try to pass because if you force it, you're going to have a pileup like we saw. So I think they'll look at it. IndyCar is very good about that sort of thing. And 33 laps of caution is what they had yesterday. And I looked this up this morning that the average this year through 11 races is 15. The second race that they had at Texas Motor Speedway, which is an oval, they had 35 laps of caution. So, and they that's a tough place for them because they've actually lost some people at that track, but they go very, very fast, and so they wreck a lot.
Absolutely. And kind of a tough weekend for Jimmy Johnson. Well. The qualifying run didn't go well, and then disqualified early in the race yesterday.
I can't really figure out what – I mean, he is a 7-time NASCAR champion. He's a bona fide Hall of Famer, no doubt about it.
Yep.
And towards the end of his NASCAR career, you could tell that he just lost a step. Something in the Hendrick Motorsports had gone through some struggles too. I kind of think if he was there this year, he may have found victory lane. But this is just completely different for him. This is something that he hasn't done. A discipline that he hasn't done in his career, and he is very much a rookie in it, and it's showing. So I do wonder, there's talks that next year, because he signed a 2-year contract, that he could run some ovals. I think that would be smart for him because he was really good at Indianapolis in his NASCAR career. Granted, the cars are different, but he knows the track. He's tested at Homestead, Miami. So there are thoughts that he could run some ovals next year, including the Indy 500, which I think would be good for him. But I just don't know how this is really going to turn out. And he's also said he hasn't closed the door on doing more in NASCAR again. So it's a name. He's handled it all with class. If he has to get out of the car early or doesn't have a good run, he's taking it with strides. But I just don't know that this is really going to work.
We'll continue the discussion when we come back, taking your thoughts on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025, 615-737-1025. You're listening to Robby Stanley alongside Chase McCabe here on Robby and Rexrode, ESPN 1025 The Game. Nashville SC fans, join ESPN 94.9 tonight from 7 to 8 p.m. for NSC Backstage, featuring Nashville SC players and coaches. Tonight's guest is the great Walker Zimmerman. Make sure you're tuned in for that. You can watch the show online via 102.5 The Game's Twitch, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and TheGameNashville.com. NSC Backstage brought to you by Camarena Tequila, the official tequila of Nashville SC. Welcome back in. Final segment of the day. Robby and Rexrode. Robbie Stanley here with Chase McCabe as well. And, Chase, we have a question for you on our text line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Tim texting in. I saw when I got home the winner got into a wreck on the 4th lap yesterday, and he was able to stay in the race, and the guy he ran over was out. Can you explain what happened and why he was not able to continue? This question from Tim.
Yeah, really it was all about repairing the car. The damage that Marcus Ericsson had, even though he went airborne, he, jumped up in the air. It was just the nose that was essentially broke off, and they have those readily available that they can replace.
Yeah.
And so they were able to replace the nose. There wasn't any other significant damage on the rest of the car, and so he was able to continue. They were able to straighten things back up, and he was able to go again, whereas Sebastian Bourdais that he hit had much more damage on the rear wing, which is harder to repair, and so that ended his day. Because if you don't have a rear wing, you're done.
Yeah, you're just totally up a creek, as they say at that point. Some news on the Titans front. This is coming from John Glennon in multiple reports. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones not out there as the Titans start practice today. Josh Reynolds is out there. So Reynolds been out there the last couple of days. Nate Davis and Ben Jones not out there as well for the Titans. So Julio continues to not be out there. A.J. Brown not out there for the second consecutive practice day, which I believe he's scheduled to be on Good Morning Football coming up a little bit later. So I don't imagine that there's anything going on right now with A.J. Brown other than just letting him have a couple days off in training camp here. I think he's displayed so far that training camp, he seems to know what he's doing out there.
Yeah, and, we've kind of talked about this on our show, and Darren Donick and Chase, of how concerned are you that these guys aren't practicing? Well, they are going to need to practice some.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, you're eventually going to have to put them out there. However, there's still more than a month until the first game.
Right.
I think we're all a little thrown off by this preseason schedule because the preseason is actually, by my math, starting at the same time. They're just going to have more time in between the last preseason game and the first regular season game.
Correct.
So that will give them time to get on the field and practice. And I would imagine you're going to see some of these guys in the preseason a little bit, probably not a lot. I don't know how much Derrick Henry's going to play. Don't know
he
how
probably
much.
Need to play all that much.
No, and Julio doesn't either, and AJ really doesn't either. So it's really what you're looking at is the guys at the end of the roster that are trying to make the team, and then also you have to build another 16-man practice squad. So, which I think is a good rule. That's something that they should keep, in my opinion. And they've done it for the second consecutive year. So I'm not all that concerned about it yet. Now, if Julio Jones and all these guys still aren't practicing the week leading up to the Arizona game, then okay. Then I might be a little concerned.
The Titans have also put out their unofficial depth chart, the first unofficial depth chart that they put out. They've got Ty Sombrilo and Kendall Lamb as the co-starters at right tackle. So a position battle going on there. Tucker McCann listed as the starting kicker at the moment. You'll never guess, but Ryan Tannehill's the starting quarterback. So
I was wondering. It was
got him on there
Terry
as well.
There for a second.
Got Logan Woodside as the number 2 and Matt Barkley as the number 3. So not a ton of surprise there. They do have Jeff Swaim listed as the starter over Anthony Ferkser at the tight end position.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I guess that depends on what kind of personnel package you line up in, but yeah.
Yeah. Not that big of a deal, but still interesting. The ones that I was really paying, obviously, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, your starting receivers, but, Nick Westbrook-Akine is behind A.J. Brown. You have Marcus Johnson, who's had a strong camp. He's behind Julio, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Behind Julio Jones as well. And again, Julio not out there today. It's a really interesting battle at wide receiver because, Chase, you and I have talked about this. How many times have you been looking around the Titans wide receiver room and thinking to yourself, do they have 5? Do they have 6?
Yeah.
And now you've got legitimately 9 guys
battling
it out. It's kind of a different place to be in. And it also as these preseason games start to get underway this week against Atlanta, those guys putting actual film out there and tape out there, it's going to be interesting to see how the Titans navigate this. Obviously, you can't keep 9 guys.
Yeah.
And then there is talk about him keeping 7 now, which I still think that's a lot of wide receivers to have.
It depends on what they give you on
Depends
special
on what
teams.
they give you on special teams. But you can't keep all of them.
No.
Can you find a way to maybe slide a couple of them into your practice squad? Do they get snatched up out there? How much of ability do they continue to play the way, like does a Marcus Johnson or does a Chester Rogers, do they continue to play the way in the preseason games that they've played so far in practice? If they do, and that's the story with Cam Batson and some of these other guys as well, it's probably going to be pretty difficult to sneak some of these guys through onto the practice squad at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, right now, and here's one that's surprising and not in a good way. Des Fitzpatrick, I mean, he's way down the depth chart right now.
Absolutely.
And I know that people that have been out there have said he's not had a strong camp. He's a 4th-round pick. You don't want to cut a 4th-round pick. I don't think they're going to cut a 4th-round pick. I know Jared has thrown out the hide him on IR that they could potentially do. But I mean, he's one that you can't sneak him through to the practice squad. He's going to get scooped up. So, but with him not performing, that's going to take a spot from somebody, and they like a Chester Rogers or a Marcus Johnson. I mean, right now, I think Marcus Johnson's on this team.
Yeah.
But I also think Nick Westbrook-Akine is probably on this team too, just based on what he can do on special teams. So, and then you obviously know the top 3 that they're going to have in A.J. Brown and Julio Jones and Josh Reynolds. Yep. So I just they got a tough job. I don't envy him for it, but it's a good problem to have.
Chase, real quickly, what do you got coming up on Darren, Donick, and Chase today?
Yeah, we got a lot we're going to cover with the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix. The CEO, Matt Cruz, is going to join us in the first hour at 10:20 to kind of do a wrap-up of that. Bobby Bowden passing away this weekend. We're going to talk to former Titan Kevin Long, who played for Bowden at Florida State. And then our usual suspects, Vince Ferrara from WNML at noon and Teron Davenport from ESPN at 1 o'clock.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it. Chase, appreciate you taking time to join me here on the show.
Absolutely. Anytime.
We'll be back tomorrow at 6 a.m. Chase McCabe coming up next. Make sure you're listening to Darren, Donick, and Chase. You're listening to ESPN 102.5 The Game.